The night was quiet, almost unnaturally so, in Riverton, Arizona. I had just settled into the soft hum of my apartment, the desert wind carrying the distant sound of motorcycles racing along the highway. It was around 1 a.m. when a frantic pounding shattered the stillness. My heart jumped. That knock wasn't casual, it was desperate, uneven, the kind that makes your instincts flare before your mind can catch up. I froze for a moment, trying to place the voice over the pounding. "Mom, please, open up." My stomach sank. It was Lena. My Lena, standing there with her eyes wide, her lips swollen, a bruise spreading beneath one eye. Her hands were pressed against her stomach, trembling, as if she were trying to hold herself together. I didn't pause to think. My police training and my mother's instinct collided. I yanked open the deadbolt and caught her before she could collapse fully. The weight of her body in my arms hit me harder than I expected. I carried her inside, the familiar floorboards of our small Riverton home creaking under our hurried footsteps. I pulled a blanket from the couch and wrapped her, my hands trembling slightly as I tried to gauge the extent of her injuries. Her phone buzzed repeatedly on the coffee table. I glimpsed a string of messages from Eric, her husband threatening, cold, controlling. My blood ran hot with anger. I could feel the knot of fear in her body, her hesitation, the way she clutched the device, warning me silently not to intervene. My mind raced. I knew this wasn't just a bruise or an accident. Something deeper, darker, had been happening long before she reached my doorstep tonight. I called the emergency room, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Prepare a bed for my daughter. We're coming in now." My car was out of commission, so a cab was arranged. While we waited, I couldn't tear my eyes from Lena, watching her try to catch her breath, listening to her small, ragged whispers, feeling a mixture of fear and fury wash over me. For a moment, I let myself look around the house, taking in the quiet, the shadows cast by the dim porch light. In the corner hung my uniform, pressed and ready. Tonight, it wasn't just my role as a mother that mattered. My badge, my experience, every part of me as an officer was going to be tested alongside the instinct to protect my child. Even as we prepared to leave, my mind flicked back to the little things, the subtle changes in Lena over the past weeks, the quiet withdrawal I had brushed off, the tension she never fully admitted to. My heart tightened with each realization. Riverton may have been a small town where everyone thought they knew everyone's business, but no one knew the fear and the courage that could unfold behind a locked door in the middle of the night. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, carrying Lena toward the waiting cab. Questions churned through me. How long had this been happening? How far had Eric gone? And most importantly, what would it take to finally ensure she was safe? The night felt heavier with each step, and yet, there was a quiet determination in me. We were stepping into danger. Yes, but we were not stepping in blind. As the cab pulled away, I glanced back at our quiet street. The shadows of Riverton stretched long across the sidewalk, carrying secrets that only the brave were willing to uncover. And I promised myself silently tonight, I would not fail her. Not as a mother, not as an officer. The fight was just beginning. Riverton wasn't the kind of town where secrets stayed hidden for long. Yet somehow, the things that mattered most often went unnoticed until it was nearly too late. I had spent more than 20 years walking its streets in uniform, a patrol sergeant keeping watch over familiar faces, small crimes, and the occasional drama that passed for news. But being a mother, Well, that was different. That was a role that couldn't be clocked in or out. One where every instinct mattered, and every quiet change in my daughter's behavior felt like a warning bell. Lena had always been bright, full of life, chasing lizards in our backyard, singing along to the radio, laughing freely. Lately, though, she had been quieter. Her calls were shorter. Her smiles came slower. The sparkle in her eyes seemed dulled, weighed down by something she refused to say aloud. I had tried to dismiss it at first. Adulthood was hard. Jobs were stressful, but deep down, I knew something had shifted. The hesitance in her voice, the way she flinched at sudden movements, all hinted at a fear she couldn't put into words. The land my father had left us outside town had become more than a memory. It was now a tangible stake in Lena's life, hard-earned and carefully preserved. It was hers, a piece of our family's legacy. Yet that inheritance had a way of attracting attention, drawing out ambitions and greed. The thought that someone could manipulate or threaten her over it made my stomach twist. I remembered seeing her glance at the property map on her phone, hesitating before answering questions about her plans. Something was brewing, a storm just beneath the surface that I could sense but couldn't yet fully see. I reflected on the duality of my life, mother, officer, protector. Each day, I balanced the demands of patrolling the town with the subtle observation required at home. Small signs of distress, missed calls, fleeting messages, they all carried weight now. I realized that what had seemed like minor anxieties were actually pieces of a puzzle pointing to danger. The son-in-law, Eric, had always been controlling, but now the quiet threat behind his actions began to feel more concrete, more immediate. As I paced the living room, memories of past late-night calls as an officer mingled with worry for my daughter. I thought of neighbors who had tried to help, of friends who might not know what was unfolding. The weight of responsibility pressed on me. How do you protect someone from unseen threats? How do you prepare for battles that cross the lines of family, law, and trust? The questions lingered, gnawing at the edges of my thoughts, reminding me that vigilance was no longer optional, it was essential. Even as the tension grew, there was a quiet warmth in remembering Lena's resilience. She had faced challenges before, and while this situation was far more insidious, her courage offered a sliver of hope. I knew I had to combine that hope with strategy, using every tool at my disposal as both mother and officer. Every step, every observation, every precaution mattered now. Riverton may have been a small town, but the dangers lurking in quiet homes could be as deep and perilous as any case I had encountered on the streets. This reflection, this growing awareness of risk, set the stage for action. I couldn't remain passive. Each detail, her behavior, the land, Eric's quiet manipulations was a thread leading toward the next steps. And as I gathered my thoughts, preparing to move from concern to deliberate action, I knew the coming hours would demand everything I had: focus, courage, and the unshakable resolve to keep my daughter safe. I guided Lena gently into the cab, keeping a steady hand on her back, feeling the tension radiate from every tremble of her body. The hospital lights seemed impossibly bright, cutting through the night like a warning. My mind raced not just as her mother, but as a police officer trained to see threats before they fully surface. Every step, every movement had to count. At Riverton General, Dr. Patel met us at the entrance, her expression moving quickly from clinical concern to quiet acknowledgement of the severity of Lena's condition. I held Lena's hand as the nurses assessed her, noting every bruise, every darkening mark across her face and side. The fear in her eyes mirrored my own, but I had to stay calm, to channel that fear into careful, deliberate action. I asked the charge nurse quietly for copies of every photograph, note, and record that documented Lena's injuries. This wasn't just for treatment, it was for protection. Each image, each entry was proof, a shield against Eric's control. As I collected the files, my mind drifted to the messages on Lena's phone, the threats, the warnings, the subtle coercion. My anger simmered beneath the surface, but I kept my voice steady, my thoughts focused. I had to protect her without escalating danger. Outside, Dolores, our neighbor, appeared almost as if on cue. She had always been watchful, and now her porch camera provided crucial evidence. Watching the footage of Lena arriving at my door earlier that morning, hearing her faint knocks and urgent calls, reinforced the stakes. Here was proof beyond words, beyond fear. The reality of the threat became tangible, recorded frame by frame. Each moment was a delicate balance tending to Lena, navigating the hospital staff, safeguarding evidence, all while assessing the reach and cunning of Eric. I reflected on the duality of my life mother and officer, and how both identities merged tonight. Protecting her required not just care, but strategy. As the night wore on, the files were secured in an encrypted folder, photographs backed up, records logged, the sense of responsibility pressed down, heavier with each step. I knew this was only the beginning. Eric's control was pervasive, but tonight we had begun to build defenses, a trail of facts he could not erase. The tension didn't ease with the hospital lights dimming behind us. It shifted into careful vigilance. I carried the knowledge of Eric's potential schemes like a weight in my chest, feeling the urgency to act, to uncover every hidden thread. Each precaution, every detail, was a step toward exposing the truth and ensuring Lena's safety. The work had only begun, but for the first time in hours, I sensed a foothold in the storm that threatened my daughter. I spent the morning going over the county records with Caleb Morton, my longtime contact at the office. Each page felt heavier than the last as I scanned Lena's signature against the deeds. Something didn't sit right. The handwriting on the document transferring her land to Tara Quinn was off, awkward, shaky, too deliberate. The notary stamp didn't match official logs. My pulse quickened. Eric had gone further than I imagined. Caleb pointed out inconsistencies I might have missed, showing me the dates and the signatures side by side. Each mismatch was like a tiny explosion in my chest. How could someone I had trusted enough to call family resort to this? My hands trembled slightly as I held the folder, the weight of betrayal pressing down. The thought of Lena losing what was rightfully hers made my stomach knot. I replayed the moment I had seen the forged paperwork, imagining Eric's smug grin and the confidence that he could manipulate both law and family. The audacity was staggering. Yet beneath my anger, there was clarity. Every detail mattered, every mark, every date, every stamp. This wasn't just about property, it was about control, about silencing Lena, about asserting power. Caleb leaned closer, whispering caution, reminding me that someone inside the system might have facilitated the filing. The sense of being outmaneuvered was chilling, but it also sharpened my focus. I couldn't afford to act recklessly. I had to be precise, methodical, ensuring that nothing could be twisted or dismissed. Each verified inconsistency was another step toward justice, a tangible foothold against Eric's manipulations. As I pieced together the evidence, I reflected on what this meant for Lena. She had already endured so much, and now her inheritance, the tangible legacy of her grandfather, was under threat. I imagined the fear she must have felt if she had known, the quiet worry she carried to bed each night. The responsibility to protect her extended beyond the bruises on her skin. It encompassed every aspect of her life, every corner where Eric's deceit could touch her. My mind shifted to strategy. I needed more than proof. I needed leverage. An ally who could testify about Eric's manipulations. Tara Quinn had been drawn into this mess, willingly or not, and convincing her to speak the truth would be crucial. I felt the weight of planning ahead, anticipating resistance, and the possibility of intimidation. But there was no turning back. The threads of deceit were exposed now, and it was only a matter of time before the confrontation became unavoidable. With the folder of verified evidence under my arm, I took a deep breath and steadied my racing heart. Each document was more than paper. It was a lifeline for Lena, a shield against further abuse, and a blueprint for holding Eric accountable. The next steps were face him, secure Tara's testimony, and build an unassailable case. The tension in my chest was sharp, but beneath it, a quiet determination settled. Tonight had shown me the depth of Eric's deception. Tomorrow, we would respond with focus, strategy, and the unshakable resolve to protect what was rightfully Lena's. The first time I stepped into Eric's pawn shop that morning, the smell of motor oil and stale cigarettes hit me immediately. Two of his friends leaned casually against the counter, smirks plastered on their faces. But I ignored them. My focus was on him. Eric sat behind his battered desk, counting bills as if nothing had changed, as if Lena's trembling face and bruised body meant nothing. I placed the folder carefully on the desk, feeling the weight of every photograph, every medical record, every frame of Dolores's camera footage. I let the silence stretch for a moment, watching his grin falter. My heart pounded, but my voice remained steady in my mind as I thought through each step. This was as much about strategy as it was about confrontation. I didn't need to raise my voice. I needed to let the evidence speak. His reaction was subtle at first, a slight twitch in his eye, a hesitation in his count. He was used to control, used to people flinching, but tonight, I wasn't flinching. I studied him, noting his arrogance, his confidence. I reminded myself why I had trained for situations like this. As a mother, I needed him to understand the stakes without giving him ammunition. As an officer, I needed precision and patience. Then there was Tara. She often spent evenings at the Silver Spur, drawn into Eric's schemes, perhaps believing in promises that weren't meant to be kept. Finding her wasn't easy, but I knew she held the key to solidifying the case. When I finally approached her, I watched for hesitation, for fear, for the small signs that she needed assurance more than pressure. I offered her clarity and safety, showing her the documents and the inconsistencies in Eric's filings. Her laughter at first was nervous, almost defensive, but it faded as she scanned the evidence. Her hands trembled, and color drained from her face. I leaned closer in my thoughts, willing her to see what I already knew: Eric had manipulated her. But the truth could set her free. I promised protection, not revenge. She needed to trust that stepping forward was safer than staying silent. I thought about the moral weight pressing on me, the responsibility to protect Lena, to uphold the law, to confront deceit without letting anger dictate my actions. I kept my focus on the facts, the evidence, and the need to secure Tara's testimony. Each detail I shared, Each explanation built the path forward. When Tara finally nodded, agreeing to testify under protection, a quiet tension lifted slightly. It wasn't relief, it was the calm before the storm, but it signaled that the next step, the courtroom confrontation, was within reach. I felt the mix of fear, determination, and moral duty coalesce. Eric's schemes had been exposed, but the fight for justice was about to enter its most visible stage. As I left the bar that night, folder in hand, I felt the weight of anticipation. The confrontation was over, but the legal battle was imminent. Every step we had taken, every cautious conversation, every careful action had set the stage. Now, it was time to see whether truth, evidence, and courage would finally tip the scales. The courtroom felt impossibly crowded that morning. Wooden benches groaned under the weight of neighbors, co-workers, and strangers, all drawn by curiosity, whispers, and the promise of a story unfolding. I took a deep breath, feeling the familiar tug of anxiety and resolve as I adjusted my uniform. Today, I wasn't just a mother. I was standing for Lena, for justice, for truth. Marcus Hale, my lawyer, organized the evidence across the long oak table. Exhibit A, the medical records. Exhibit B, the photos of Lena's bruises. Exhibit C, Dolores's camera footage. Exhibit D, the threatening texts. Exhibit E, the forged deed with Tara's name. Each document was a story of deceit, a marker of the truth we were about to lay bare. My heart raced with every piece we displayed. Dr. Patel stepped forward first, detailing Lena's injuries with calm precision. I watched as her clinical explanations translated into devastating proof. The quiet gasp from the audience reminded me of the weight of our reality. These weren't just papers, they were evidence of real pain, real violation. Eric shifted in his chair, the first flicker of unease in his previously unshakable demeanor. Next, the camera footage played. Lena at my porch that morning, trembling, knocking weakly, calling out for help. The room held its breath as the moments replayed. Each frame was undeniable. The whispers turned to gasps. Eric's confident posture faltered for just a heartbeat. My pulse thudded, a mix of fear and vindication. The texts scrolled across the screen, threatening and controlling. Words that had haunted Lena whispered back at him in public view. I imagined her relief as the proof she had carried silently now spoke louder than any lie he could tell. Then, the forged deed. Caleb Morton testified to its inconsistencies, the notary stamp that didn't align with records, the awkward, unnatural handwriting. Piece by piece, the foundation of Eric's control crumbled. Finally, Tara Quinn took the stand. Her hands trembled, her voice shaky, but she told the truth. She described the coercion, the false promises, and Eric's manipulations. The courtroom leaned in, listening as the layers of deception were peeled away, exposing the cold calculation behind his actions. Eric's face drained of color. The smirk was gone, replaced by panic, disbelief, and desperation. Through it all, I remained grounded, absorbing each moment, each revelation. I thought of Lena, imagining the weight lifting from her shoulders as the truth unfolded, imagining the small, quiet exhalations she must feel now that the lies could no longer dominate her life. Every photograph, every record, every testimony brought us closer to not just legal victory, but moral vindication. When Judge Keaton returned, his voice steady and deliberate, relief mingled with awe in the courtroom. Protective orders for Lena, restoration of her inheritance, freezing of Eric's assets, referral for criminal charges. The words rang out like a verdict, not just for law, but for right. Two deputies approached, cuffs clicking around Eric's wrists, a sound that resonated deeper than metal on metal. It was the final acknowledgement that justice had been served. I reached for Lena's hand, feeling her tremble slightly, but also sensing a shift. A first breath of freedom, a first step toward healing. The courtroom murmur softened, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a moment to feel both relief and pride. The fight had been long, the stakes immense, but the truth carefully gathered, painstakingly documented, had triumphed. I realized then that protection and courage, when paired with evidence and persistence, could rewrite the narrative, could reclaim safety, and could restore the dignity that had been threatened. The days following the courtroom victory were quieter, yet every moment was charged with reflection and healing. Lena's steps were tentative at first, her mornings punctuated by therapy sessions with Dr. Naomi Winters, learning grounding exercises and ways to manage the lingering anxiety that haunted her nights. I watched her practice counting objects in a room, steadying her breath, writing down her fears instead of letting them fester in silence. Each small victory, walking to the store without scanning every doorway, cooking a simple meal, humming an old song, felt monumental. I often caught myself pausing, observing her, feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and lingering concern. The scars of fear don't vanish overnight, and yet there was lightness returning to her movements, to her smile. It reminded me why every careful step I had taken, documenting injuries, preserving evidence, confronting lies, had mattered. Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it is the quiet persistence of a mother's watchful care, the methodical collection of facts, the unwavering commitment to truth. Reflecting on the past weeks, I understood more clearly the power of preparation and action. Evidence isn't just a tool for the courtroom, it is a shield, a voice for those who cannot safely speak. Lena's story could have been lost to fear, rumors, or intimidation, but careful, deliberate steps ensured her voice, her pain, and her rights were preserved. I thought about the neighbors who helped, the professionals who guided us, and the moments when choices had to be made quickly, yet thoughtfully. Evenings in our home became moments of quiet celebration. The ordinary, the shared meal, a laugh at a remembered joke. A door held open for a neighbor felt profound. Healing isn't linear. There are setbacks, sleepless nights, reminders of trauma, but with patience, support, and consistent care, recovery begins to weave itself into daily life. Watching Lena sleep peacefully, I felt the weight of fear lift just a little. It wasn't over, but we had reclaimed our ground. I also reflected on the lessons that extend beyond our personal story. Speaking up, documenting, seeking help. These aren't just legal strategies. They are acts of courage, essential in facing abuse or fraud. To anyone listening, the message is clear: you do not have to endure silently. Help exists, systems exist, and the simple act of taking the first step can set in motion a path towards safety and justice. As I consider the journey from that frantic knock at 1 a.m. to the courtroom's decisive verdict, I feel a deep gratitude for resilience, for truth, and for the unwavering commitment to protect those we love. The fight may leave scars, but it also leaves lessons about courage, vigilance, and the transformative power of standing firmly on the side of justice. If you've been listening and parts of Lena's story resonate, I hope you feel the strength to take action in your own life or support someone in need. Remember, silence only protects those who harm. Speaking up, even when it feels difficult, can open the door to safety and healing. And if this story reached you in some meaningful way, I encourage you to share it, leave a comment, and let others know they are not alone. Together, courage and truth can carve a path toward justice, hope, and a brighter tomorrow.